Hey everyone, I'm Joanne. This is Pastels with Joanne. Thanks for joining us today. So we're going to carry on with our painting. Today we're going to fill in some trees, going to kind of work specifically on getting some of these trees in here. And so I'm just going to start with putting in a layer of chunks. And so the chunks are the softer pastels. They really pick up pigment and color. And so you're going to really be able to see as I place that in here. So I've got to kind of put in some of this darker area right in here. You can really see how those softer chunks just really pick up the color really easily. So you get a really, really nice, rich, intense color, lots of pigment with the softer pastels. So I'm just going to put a couple layers of that in here. And I think I'll show you, we're going to work on some of this tree trunk area in general today. So I'm just going to put in some lighter ones and some darker ones. Oh, this one's going on nice and dark. This is another really soft one. Some of the red or browns have to come in as well. So there's going to be lots of layering in the tree trunks. Lots of different colors. It goes from light to dark as you move higher up into the painting in here. So there's lots of light browns that are going to happen up in the higher areas. But for now, we'll put in a couple of layers in this bigger trunk section and get a little bit of that trunk design going on in here. So what I'm going to do is put these layers of chalk in here with the chunks, and then we'll work specifically on some individual areas of bark and some individual areas in the branches. So just getting this nice, this lighter warm brown in here for some of these branches. And I'll pull in some of that darker brown up into here. Okay, so we've also got the branch here that her arm is resting on, or her hand is holding on to. And so I'm going to place that in with this lighter warm brown. Just kind of going carefully up against where her hand is so that we know where this branch is supposed to sit. And it's this line right in here. I'm going to travel it all the way up. Get that placed in so we know that's what this is. And I'll put in a little bit of a layer of this other tree trunk on this side. I'm going to get a dark here. I'm going to blend in some of the dark middle area right in here, just so that we can see that change from one trunk to the next. This is a dark green that I blended in here, but when it's all blended in, it won't read as green, but it's going to pick up the reflection of the green in the shadows anyway, because there's so much green in the piece. So just blending that in as a dark, as a base, will end up getting covered mostly, but place that in there. And it's going to go lighter right here again. Got two light sections coming around to the outside edge of the trunk. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in with pencils, and we're going to work on some trunk design here. Put some of these darks in again. Blend a little bit of that brown in here. And with the pencils, what we're going to do is we're going to look kind of specifically at what kind of patterns and shapes, lights and darks, are created by the bark on the trunk of the tree. So I'm just going right up snug to her arm. Get that layer in there, and then we'll pull out some pencils. Okay, so let's just put in a little bit of highlight in here. So let's put in a lighter shade. Let's get some highlight marked out. And all we need is just a base of color in here, generally happening where it needs to be. And then we'll come in with the chunks and get really, or pardon me, with the pencils and get really specific. Okay. So with the pencils, we're going to work on the specific design. I think I'm going to pull my device in here and then I can zoom in a little bit closer. Okay, there we have a really great view of the trunk in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with some of the darker shapes. So I'm going to take my dark purple and I'm actually going to start marking in some of these creases that are created by the bark. So I'm just going to blend this out so that this is all sort of kind of combined together and that we have a smooth surface of chalk to work on. And I'm going to just start placing in some of these lines or creases that are created by the bark. So when I do that, I'm going to actually anchor my finger by using my knuckle on my pinky up against the area in her dress, just so that my hand isn't moving back and forth across this area of suede. You can also cover this with paper if you want, so that it doesn't get smudged while you're working in a different section. But even just anchoring your hand and knowing that you're keeping it there without moving it while you're working in this particular section is a really good way to just prevent any smudging from happening. So once I put my finger down and anchor my knuckle onto the suede, I know I'm not going to move my hand until I'm done working in this part, and then I'll just lift my hand straight out away so that no smudging happens. And it's just kind of, I just have it in my mind. I know that I won't move my finger. And that does a couple of things. It prevents the smudging from happening, and it also gives you a steadiness that you wouldn't have otherwise. The hand would be moving around and you really wouldn't be able to create some of the detail as easily, especially when you're working, like for example, in the area of the face where it needs to be really precise and exact. You need your hand to be really steady to get specific shapes in there. That's when you're really going to want to make sure you anchor your finger somewhere so that you have the steadiness and you're not doing any smudging of any other areas of your piece. So I'm just kind of generally marking in these creases. Lift my hand away now, and I want to make them even darker yet. So I'm going to take I have a really dark brown here that I'm going to use. So I'm just making sure my knuckle's still clean. I'm going to re-anchor, and I'm going to go back in, and I'm just going to follow all the lines that I did with this dark brown right over top of the purple. And when I do that, it's kind of blending those colors together. Just adding a second layer, and you can see how much darker that's getting by getting that second layer in there. Just really place that in. Okay, so we got some really cool creases in there. Just going to take one of my lighter chunks. And I really kind of want to get a little bit cooler in here. So there's kind of some cooler colors happening in here. Some of the same shades, kind of similar shades to kind of the mintier greens and blues are almost happening in here. So I'm going to put in just some of these little highlights. So this is kind of just more of a warm white chunk that I'm putting in here, but I'm just going to place that in between these creases just to get that highlight going. few more little creases happening in here. So what's happening right here is this is that really dark edge. It's in deep shadow. So I'm just going to kind of work on this specific edge right in here. Get that nice and dark, and to get the kind of jagged bumpiness that is created by tree bark is what I'm kind of focusing on as I put this in. So I'm using my dark purple first of all, but I'm going to layer in some nice dark shades, a bunch of different colors. So this is kind of cool to see, because what this does is it really shows you, even though we get really great pigment from the chunks, you can actually get really quite intense dark color from using pencils as well. So it's blending in a dark gray. And I'm going to use my dark brown as well. So getting a nice rich dark edge here happening in the shadow. And I'm going to finish that off with going back to the purple. Use that dark purple that I love to use in every piece. It's really going to pull the dark out. I'm just going to get rid of some of that dust. I'm just going to blend this way because we are going to put some detail in there in a moment, but I just want to get the dark layer in there. Okay, so one final layer with this purple. And at the same time, I'm going to just mark in some of the texture. So in this area, we probably have, it's hard to see. I'm guessing that there would be the same creases and chunkiness that's happening inside the bark that we see on the lit side of the tree, but we can't see that. What we see instead is a really dark area that is textured. It's got a little bit of a light, it's all very dark, but some areas are darker than others in kind of funky little shapes. And so that's what I'm going to put in now. So when I go in with my pencil, I'm literally just kind of looking at the tree and seeing what the darkest shapes that are inside that area look like. And they're, you know, definitely really random, as everything in nature is. So I'm just making sure that I kind of go generally the same shapes and placement of those darks as I see in the photo. So this is where it's really tempting and to kind of go in here and just start filling this in randomly without looking at the photo, because we know that it's just a bunch of random shapes. However, if you actually follow your photo and try to be accurate with the placement of those random shapes and kind of pay closer attention to them instead of just going in there and kind of creating your own, it will end up looking way more realistic when it's finished. Even though the shapes are random and don't make any sense really, following the photo is always your best bet to create a really realistic looking piece. So I'm going to come in here now and I'm going to add some of my chunks in again and just kind of use that to create some of the other little shapes that we see happening in there. And even though it's in a really dark section, you can see the texture and that shadowed area starting to come together. And I'm going to come in with one of my lighter shades again, and I'm going to start putting that textured area into the light section. So I'm just going to kind of pull in a few little light shapes in here. And I'm going to put in some of our creases again, just like we did before. So the creases on this side are going to happen, they're a little bit lighter than they are on this side. So I'm just going to place some of those in there. Let me use the purple first. I'm kind of going inside and outside of that highlight shape that I just put in. Kind of breaking it apart a little bit when I put those creases in there. And just kind of blend it in. Come back in with a lighter chunk and get some of those highlights back in there. And so if you follow kind of where you placed some of those creases and put the highlight beside them, that's where you really start to see the texture come together with the bark. I'm going to go in with my dark brown. Put some of that back in. So it's a layering process back and forth that helps create that as well. I'm not going to get it just by kind of going in there once and putting that texture in. It really comes together by going back and forth between both lights and darks, and pencils and chunks really is kind of the key to almost every pastel painting, really. If you do a balanced amount of pencil versus chunk, it gives you a really great look. So if we take a look at what happens where the branches meet up with the trunk of the tree, we'll kind of place that in there as well. So we have a little bit of a shadow happening on the underside of that. So I'm going to get that placed in. It's kind of a dark brown, and it sort of sits on the underside of where that trunk starts to come away. And then we see some creases happening too as it comes down. So I'll place that in while I'm looking there. Get that put in. And then as it comes out, it goes from dark, kind of dark to light. Gets lighter, quite a bit lighter as we move up the trunk, or pardon me, the branch. And so where the light is hitting this branch, you can see that it's lighter on the top and shadowed as we go underneath. So that will create the look of the roundness or the cylinder shape of the branch itself, making sure that you add that light in there properly. So the underside of the branch is going to be darker, and as you move to the top of the branch, you're going to see the highlight. Highlight in there. And it's a soft change. You can't see really as much detail in there. So I'm just going to kind of put the shapes in that I see and the lights and darks that I see. Create the look of that branch. And again with this other branch, it's kind of covered up by the first branch right in this section where they're two meeting up. So I'm just going to get the highlight put in right here for this one. And I'm going to follow that up and out to the outside edge of the canvas. I need to put the rest of that in there. So highlight. And then the darker underside area as we come down. So I'm just going to do the outside edge of this branch first, just because I have some loose pastel in there from just sort of placing it in. Just crisping out that outer edge and then adding in the underside, which is shadowed. And then just gently blending it as I come upwards, getting softer and softer as I come up, so that I'm getting a gradual change from light to dark, so that it's not outlined, but has a gradual change from light to dark. I'm going to put some warmth in the middle here, in that middle area where it's still kind of in shadow a little bit, but it's got more color to it. So right in the middle of the branch, I'm sort of just blending the overlap between the dark and the light. Right in the middle of the branch. I'm going to do the same in this one. And you can see the form starting to come to life. The roundness of the branch starting to happen. A little stub that's kind of coming away from this, I'm going to put that in there. and that underside shadow. There's a little bit stronger of a shadow happening on this branch, so I'm just going to kind of get that a little bit darker. And I'm just going to put a little bit more color in on where the light and the dark are meeting up right in here. Just softening this because it's kind of looking to me like it's got kind of too crisp of an edge where that light and dark meet up, making it look kind of liney. And we don't want that. So I'm just going to soften it by blending right over top of where the light and the dark are meeting up. Going right over top of wherever, if you see a line happening that you don't want there, that's what you want to do, is just blend right over top of the line so that you're blending in the light area and in the dark area at the same time. And that really helps to soften edges. And that did help create some shape in there. It's not quite light enough. We really want to get some strong highlights on those branches as well. So I'm going to just place that in with some of this white chunk. Now this is going to look way lighter than it needs to be and kind of chunkier than it should be, but I'm going to touch that up really quickly with the pencils. Just want to get it placed in there. And then back to that medium color again. Because it's a chunk and it's soft, before it gets blended into the fibers of the suede, it's sort of sitting on top of the suede. So it's easy to put in a kind of a layer of chunk and then blend it away quite easily with a pencil, which is what I just did. That's why it really quickly was able to soften it with this pencil to create that effect. And that gives me that strong highlight. So again, here we have another really kind of crisp line that I want to remove. And I'm just going to go right over top of that light and dark area with I'm going a little bit softer because I'm working in a sort of a tight area in here and I want to keep the highlight. But right over top where those two meet up, just softening that really gently. And we have a nice little highlight happening. Okay, so we're going to take a look and see what happens where these ones are meeting up. And again, we kind of have a little bit of a dark edge happening where this branch is meeting up with the trunk, the tree. So we're going to get that placed in there. And this one doesn't have that as much. It's kind of just sort of flowing into a branch. It doesn't have that crisp underside. So I'm just going to kind of combine that in. And this branch in particular is very warm and quite light. So I'm going to kind of come in with some of my lighter pencils right off the start. So even my shadowed areas, they'll have a little bit, I'll use a little bit of my dark brown, just kind of one layer basically of that. And then I'm going to soften it out with my medium tone right over top of it. Those both placed in there. And then really want to focus in on some lights and highlight areas. So we're going to place that in right over top of the brown, this light color. And we're going to blend that in also. So I'm not going right to the edge of my canvas now with these particular branches, and that's because we're going to pull some of that swirly green background in over here as well a little later on. So otherwise I would be going right to the very edge of the canvas with these branches, but won't be doing that. And softening it out. Blow away some of that dust. And so I'm going to take another shade of warm brown. I'm going to kind of go with this burgundy one actually. It's a little bit darker and it's just going to help me get a few little dark edges in on this branch on the underside. You can see my finger smudging over here, but this will all cover really well when I go in to add the layers of the background. But if you want to prevent that, piece of paper over top of this area where your hand is working will work for that. And just blend in some of that warmth underneath. Coming in with some highlights again and back down into the trunk of the tree again. And so now I'm just kind of looking at the shapes that are created by the lights that are in between the creases. Just want to place a few of those in there. And I'm going to kind of come up the trunk of the tree. I lost my color here. There we go. So I'm going to add a little bit of a base up here. I'm going to pull some of this light layer of light in before I come over top here. The tree gets lighter, quite a bit lighter as we move up. So we do want to focus on making sure we have a layer of lighter chalk too. You don't want to get too dark once you move up to the higher part of the tree. I'm just going to kind of get a base in there. And just a little bit of my darks. Just a few spots where we see some darks being pulled in. Good. I'm just going to pull those in, and we're just going to continue to layer a base of chunk up the tree, just like we did as we moved down, except we'll work with some lighter colors. So just get that based in, and then we'll add some more detail with the pencils again. And soften that out. I'm just going to give it a little bit of a blend with my finger, just so I know I have a kind of a solid base of color for the trunk. And so we'll finish this project up next time. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, I'm Joanne Marchildon, and this was Pastels with Joanne. Looking forward to seeing you next time. You can find us at joannemarchildon.com and join us for paint and party nights. See you next time.